Hi, today we're going to talk about rates, and unit price. So first off, a rate is just a ratio or a fraction comparing two quantities. So for example, if I'm in a classroom and I say, hey, look, there are 13 boys in this classroom and there are 11 girls, well, then I could just write a ratio. My ratio could be 13 boys to 11 girls. This is one way to write the ratio. Another strategy or another notation we can use is like a fraction, 13 boys to 11 girls. Or we can literally write the words that I'm saying. I'm saying 13 boys to 11 girls. So these are rates. It can really work for anything, any two quantities that you want to compare. But rates are really more helpful, not always, but often more helpful when they are actually unit rates. So let me write that down, unit rate. And in a unit rate, we are going to have a rate or a ratio or a fraction, and we're going to divide so that the bottom quantity is 1. So we could use our example of 13 boys to 11 girls and say, well, how many boys are there per one girl? So we would have to divide 13 divided by 11. That means there's 1.2 boys per girl. Okay, well, obviously that's not a super great example because you can't actually split up people, but that's just showing you that's a unit rate. Another example of a unit rate would be, well, actually, the next thing I want to talk about, oh no, never mind. Here's a good one. I just looked at my notes. Is let's say that I am driving and I've been driving at a constant speed and I've gone 120 miles and it's already been an hour and a half. Okay, so 1.5 hours. And I say, well, hey, I'm curious, what speed have I been driving? So I just have to divide 120 divided by 1.5, and that tells me that I've been driving 80 miles in 1 hour, which we are familiar with the notation 80 miles per hour. So in 1 hour, I've gone 80 miles. Now, the reason that these are useful is then, hey, I say, hey, I'm driving 80 miles an hour. Well, I'm curious, how far will I have gone in 3 hours if I keep going at this speed? Well, if I want to know how far I'm going to go in 3 hours, all I have to do is take this unit rate and multiply it by 3. Because then I will say, oh, hey, well, then I do 80 times 3, which is 240. And I can say, hey, I will go 240 miles in 3 hours. I could even write that as a rate, not a unit rate, but I could write it as a rate, 240 miles in 3 hours. Okay, so the same thing could be said for back here in our weird example, right? If there's 1.2 boys per girl, and I say, okay, well, the number of people has changed and now there's 20 girls. So how many boys are there? If we're saying that this rate is staying the same, then we say, okay, well, there's 20 girls, so I multiply by 20 girls to figure out 1.2 times 20. And we say, hey, that means there's 24 boys for those 20 girls. Okay, so we've just talked about regular old rates. We've now talked about unit rates, where we divide the top divided by the bottom, and that gives us a quantity where the second one is 1, right? 1.2 boys per 1 girl. Okay, we divide the top divided by the bottom, and we get a quantity where we get a ratio where the second quantity is 1, 80 miles in 1 hour. So now we're going to talk about unit price, which is rates and unit rates, just dealing with money. So commonly we'll be at the store, maybe you're buying some pasta and you'll say, hey, look, this pasta costs $1.50 for 16 ounces of pasta. Well, sometimes the store will tell you, right, on the little price tag, at least at our store, it does. Sometimes it'll tell you how much that is per ounce, but we can solve that ourselves. All we do is divide 1.5 divided by 16 ounces. And this tells us that, hey, that means it's 9 cents per ounce. Okay, now whenever we're doing a unit price, let me type that in there, unit price. There's one thing that we do have to keep in mind, and that is that the money is always on the top and the number of items is always on the bottom. So in this case, our items was 16 ounces, but our price is on the top. So we could say something like, hey, I just spent 50 cents on 4 bananas. And then I say, hey, well, how much is that per banana? I do 0.50 or 0.5 divided by 4, and I say, oh, hey, well, look at that. It's 0.125 per banana. Okay, well, that's 1/1000th of a penny. You can't do that, but that would be about 13 cents per banana. Okay, so that's our unit price, where the money is always on top and the number of items is always on the bottom. So that was an introduction to rates, unit rate, and unit price.